Fhoid. Fhoid. Ardbeg Fon Fhoid. Does anyone kind of get the impression that the Gaelic-speaking distilleries are kind of trolling the entire English-speaking world with some of their Gaelic-named releases? Hello whisky fans, welcome back. So I've just recorded the video for this year's Ardbeg committee release Ardcore, and in that video I mentioned another recent Ardbeg release, and that's the elephant in the room, the very expensive elephant, Ardbeg Fon Fhoid. And I have to start this video off by saying this is not a review because I don't have any, and I'm not going to be getting any because Ardbeg Fon Fhoid, it's, if you can call it available at all, the price is now well over £2,500 for a bottle. So Ardbeg Fon Fhoid, or Fon Fhoid as a lot of people are going to be calling it, it's Gaelic for to bury or something like that, or to put under turf. And that's exactly what this release from Ardbeg is. They've taken just 2 casks, so it's going to be a very limited release. And we're told that they're both second fill American bourbon casks. They've filled them with Ardbeg spirit, and they've buried them in a peat bog for 2 years and 10 months. So obviously Ardbeg they're very good at leading people to believe things that are probably more interesting than what's actually happened. I think that it's a little bit of a common theme with Ardbeg, that the most interesting thing about some of their committee releases is not necessarily what they're talking about. And I mentioned this with the Ardbeg fermentation. With the label and the marketing, they made this big deal about how the whiskey had been exposed to all of these rogue invaders, this bacteria and flora and fauna that's getting into this whiskey and doing weird things in the washbacks. And I said at the time, that's not the most interesting thing about that whiskey. The most interesting thing about Ardbeg fermentation is that it was left in the washbacks for several weeks rather than the 2 or 3 days that most distilleries normally leave the wash in the washbacks for. And I think it's a similar thing with this Ardbeg that's been buried in a peat bog. I don't care that the casks have been buried in a peat bog. I do care that it's an Ardbeg release that's been aged anaerobically. It's quite an unusual thing to have a whiskey which has been matured or left in a cask for the 3+ years in wood where it has no way at all of breathing, so everything that's in the cask when it goes in stays in there, it can't get out, and no air from the outside is capable of getting into that cask. And I think that's a really interesting experiment. I would love to be able to try whiskey from Ardbeg or anywhere else that's been in a sealed environment. Obviously it's not going to age as much, probably not as well as whiskey that's allowed to sit in a cask in a warehouse that's got air circulating around it and getting in and out of that wood. But I'd definitely be up for trying it. Other distilleries have done these experiments in the past before, where I know some people have experimented with casks wrapped in plastic so that there's no air getting in or out. It's usually a bit of a disaster, doesn't go that well, and they don't repeat it. I've never tried any of these anaerobically aged whiskies, but I imagine that it's probably going to be something similar to old bottle effect rather than traditional cask maturation, although obviously you get a little bit of that oakiness providing that the cask is fresh. But yeah, definitely something that I would love the chance to try. Problem being is that if you want to buy a bottle of Ardbeg Fon Fhoid, then you need over £2,500, and you need to go through the hassle of buying an NFT in order to do so. And the way it works is that you buy this NFT, and a piece of code is then submitted to the blockchain that registers you as the legal owner of that NFT, and at a later date you can then trade this NFT to Ardbeg, who then destroy it apparently in exchange for sending you your particular bottle. Now, NFTs are kind of the latest buzzword. They're really the cool, hip and happening thing at the moment. And it may just be that I'm rapidly evolving into a grumpy old git, but I really couldn't care less about NFTs. This new thing from Ardbeg and other distilleries are getting in on the NFT bandwagon as well. It just seems like whiskey with extra steps, added expense and paperwork, and I don't really see the fun in that. Also, and I'm not an expert on this, on NFTs or anything, or an expert on whiskey. I'm just a guy that appreciates whiskey the same as all of you. But it seems odd to take NFTs that should be unique and desirable in themselves, and for Ardbeg to do what they're doing, which is basically turning that NFT into a token that functions the same as hundreds of other tokens, that they can be cashed in exchange for the purchase of a bottle of whiskey, and that bottle of whiskey itself is identical and interchangeable with all of the other bottles of Ardbeg Fon Fhoid. I think that it's very interesting. I mean that genuinely, it is interesting, but also kind of stupid. But I really do genuinely hope that anyone that is interested in this, all this fun with NFTs and certificates and international shipping and stuff, I hope that they all really have fun with it. And I am interested in seeing how all of this stuff develops and how people respond to it. Because it does really raise some really interesting questions, like what is the essence and nature of an NFT? What is fungibility? And is an NFT truly fungible when you've basically converted it into currency? And more interesting than that, what is the value of a thing and what is ownership? If you never even see a thing that you supposedly own and you're not even able to see it because it's not a physical thing and you're not able to do anything with it, do you really own it? Is it really anything at all? Personally, if I own a whiskey or a representation of a whiskey, I expect to be able to drink it. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think. Cheers.